Welcome back to the booth, everyone. You're listening to the deep dive you didn't know you needed, but your brain definitely does. We are peeling back the layers on the digital habits we usually keep in the dark. To get started on the heavy lifting today, let's start with our sex, BV. Max, the floor is yours.
Susie and John have laid out the how and the why of the initial hook, but I want to talk about the aftermath. In behavioral science, we don't just look at the action, we look at the internal landscape. We use George Angel's biopsychosocial model to understand this. To see why porn addiction is so devastating, we have to start with the bio, the literal hardware in your skull. Let's discuss first the biological baseline and the supernormal hijack. Every human has a baseline for pleasure. When we eat a good meal, finish a hard workout, or hang out with friends at a cafe, our brain releases dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter that says, "This was good, do it again." That's our natural reward system. But porn addiction introduces what ethologist Nicholas Tinbergen called a supernormal stimulus. It's like eating a 5,000-calorie burger every time you're just slightly hungry. It provides a level of novelty and visual intensity that the human brain simply did not evolve to handle.
Max, let me stop you there. So the brain isn't built for that much information? You think it's not just in bad habit, like self-control? The physical wiring of being changes because of poor addiction?
Exactly. Nagiging manhid na talaga tayo. Think of your brain like a high-end stereo system. Normally, you enjoy music at a comfortable level. But with porn addiction, it's like cranking the volume to 100 every single day. Eventually, the speakers start to blow out. In clinical terms, we call this downregulation. To maintain homeostasis, that state of internal balance, your brain actually reduces the number of dopamine receptors because it can handle the noise. The result? Anhedonia. That's the fancy word for when the rest of your life starts feeling muted. Yung sunset, yung kape sa umaga, o kahit yung excitement ng graduation, hindi na siya sapat. It doesn't hit the same because your brain is waiting for that volume 100 spike just to feel anything at all. You aren't just unmotivated. You are experiencing a physiological shift in your ability to experience joy. Now, let's move to the psychological layer. Here we're gonna discuss the intrapsychic split and the invisible wall. In our clinical notes, we emphasize authenticity and congruence, concepts from Carl Rogers as the foundation of mental health. But porn addiction creates what we call an intrapsychic split. There is the public self, the high-achieving student, the leader, the reliable ate or kuya, and then there is the private self trapped in the screen. This lack of authenticity creates a massive cognitive load. You are spending so much mental energy hiding your history, managing your guilt, and playing a role that you have no vitality left for your actual life. Kaya ka laging pagod, hindi dahil sa puyat, kundi dahil sa bigat ng tinatago mo.
Okay, so that intimacy paradox you mentioned, how does that translate through your life? If someone is listening and they think their private habit doesn't affect the relationships, how does porn addiction turn into that invisible wall when they're finally with a real person?
It's through the spectator effect. When someone is struggling with porn addiction, they aren't fully present. Instead of being in the moment of connection, they are mentally editing or comparing the real person to the thousands of digital images they've consumed. This erodes empathic resonance. Using object relations theory, thinkers like Melanie Klein and Donald Winnicott, we see that persons stop seeing others as whole objects, complex humans with stories and emotions. Instead, they engage in objectification, seeing people as part objects or the tools for a specific function. You might be sitting right across from your partner, but emotionally, you are in a state of profound withdrawal. You use the screen to feel less lonely, but it actually makes you less capable of real connection. Para kang multo sa sarili mong bahay, ganun. Okay, so it's a biological hijack and a psychological split. Ngayon, para sa mga nakikinig na feeling stuck sa loop na ito, how do we break it down? It feels so automatic, parang wala ka ng control. Let's talk about the functional loop. That's where we look at the functional analysis. If you want to stop porn addiction, you have to stop looking at it as an accident and start looking at its function. What is this behavior doing for you? In our functional analysis based on B.F. Skinner's behavioral principles, we use the ABC model. A is for antecedent. These are the triggers. It could be external, being alone, 2 a.m., boredom. But usually, they are predisposing factors. Internal feelings like academic stress, the pressure to succeed, or even loneliness. Ito yung mitsa. B is for behavior. This is the compulsive seeking and consumption of porn. C is for consequence. This is the key. The immediate consequence is relief. A massive dopamine hit that numbs the stress. Kumbaga, it works for 10 seconds. But the long-term consequence is the perpetuating factor. The shame, the brain fog, and the social withdrawal that led you right back to the start.
All right, so the brain isn't addicted to the images. It's addicted to the relief from the stress or the boredom. Like, we are using porn as a remedy or a problems in life.
Mismo. It's a maladaptive coping mechanism. Because we don't talk about sex or mental health openly in the Philippines, yung cultural silence natin, the shame becomes the fuel. This creates the shame-stress cycle. You feel ashamed of the porn addiction, which causes stress, and since you haven't learned other ways to cope, you go back to the habit for comfort. It's a self-sustaining cycle of isolation. Now, let's talk about the social-cultural ripple. To round out the biopsychosocial model, we have to look at the social ripple. Porn addiction doesn't happen in a vacuum. We use Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory to see how this affects your environment. Hindi lang ito usapin ng kung ano ang nasa loob ng utak mo. Usapin din ito ng kung anong klaseng mundo ang ginagalawan mo. At the microsystem level, we look at the immediate strain on family, friends, or your partner. Porn addiction is often a thief of time and presence. Dito pumapasok yung tinatawag nating social erosion. You start missing out on real-world gatherings dahil gusto mo na lang mapag-isa with your phone or with the screen watching something. In our context, where pakikipagkapwa is so central, this isolation is particularly heavy. You might be physically present at a family dinner in your house but emotionally nakadetach ka. You're preoccupied with the secret life, creating a wall between you and the people who care about you most. Nandyan ka, pero hindi ka ramdam. When we zoom out to the macro system level, we're looking at the culture of hyperconsumerism. Our modern society is built on instant gratification. We live in an attention economy where apps and platforms are literally designed to keep us hooked for profit. Tinuturuan tayo ng lipunan na kapag malungkot ka, bored, o stress, kailangan mong humanap ng mabilis na fix. Whether it's impulsive online shopping or scrolling through porn, the culture validates the addiction. It tells us, don't sit with your discomfort, just find a better high. Imbes na harapin ang bigat ng nararamdaman, tinuturuan tayong mag-escape. This social reinforcement makes breaking the cycle incredibly difficult. If the world around us is designed to keep us stimulated, choosing recovery feels like swimming against a massive cultural tide. You aren't just fighting your own brain. You are fighting a system that benefits from your lack of impulse control. Understanding this ripple helps us realize that recovery isn't just about willpower. It's about recognizing how our environment influences our choices and learning to build a microenvironment that protects us even when the rest of the world is trying to pull us back in. It sounds like a heavy prison. Now let's talk about the hope of neuroplasticity. As behavioral science students, we know the brain isn't a static machine. Looking at all this effect or damages, is there actually a way to fix those blown out speakers? That is the most important part of today's deep dive. The brain is neuroplastic, a term popularized by researchers like Norman Doidge. If the brain can be rewarded for porn addiction through repetition, it can be rewarded for connection through intentionality. Neuroplasticity means your brain is always learning and adapting. We've looked at the problem formulation, how the biology, the psychology, and the culture keep us stuck. But identifying these patterns is the first step toward behavior change. Hindi ka sira. Your brain just adapted to a high-volume stimulus to survive, and with the right boundaries, it can learn to find joy in low-volume reality again. We just have to bridge the gap between that public and private self. Episode 4 has been about the effects, the biological hijacking, the psychological split, and the social erosion. But understanding the why is the first step toward the how. So if episode 4 is about how we get stuck, episode 5 is about how we get out. Lei is going to take us through the actual intervention, how we set those digital boundaries, find community, and start to heal that invisible wall. Kailangan nating buuin ulit yung split na yon. Remember, the journey toward change begins with awareness, and the brain's ability to heal is more powerful than the habit itself. We'll see you in the next one.
Let's talk about sex, baby.